I thought, I need an infusion of Gene's energy, and it's his birthday on Christmas. And then I said to Melinda, let's have a party. We need a party. And so Melinda was game to throw a party with me. And I'm representing, at the moment, I'm representing focusing oriented relational community empowerment, but I represent focusing oriented relational therapy and other things. But I think we're not even representing anything right now. We're just coming together, those of us who continue to be inspired by Gene, to love him. Those of you who haven't known him and only have known his work, it will be a chance for you to get to know him a little bit. And I picture us in this holiday season where I am at sort of cold and bleak, and I picture us gathering around a fire together and telling stories about Gene and bringing his energy into our new year. So I thought, oh, I should wear my earrings. I should wear a pretty blouse. No, not for a Jane party. So I'm dressed in the most comfortable, woodsy way, and I hope that you all can relax and join this party. We've asked a few people to speak who were close to Jane, and then there'll be music, and then there'll be a chance for any of you to speak who wants to. And we're going to have, if we have time, a little breakout room time to share, and wishes for the focusing community and the focusing work at the end, birthday wishes. So welcome, everybody.
We'd love for Ann Weiser Cornell to say a few words, and Rob Parker, Dave Young, Gisela Uhl. Ann, would you like to start?
Thank you so much. It would be a pleasure. Hi, Melinda. Hi, Lynn. Hi to so many.
Welcome to the party.
People I know, and some from a long time ago. Wow. Yes, how wonderful to be remembering Gene the day after his birthday. And it's still his birthday. Such a, when I reflect on how different my life would have been without him, and what a beautiful way of understanding that every person comes with their reasons, and the diversity and difference. It makes sense. It's natural. I remember when I was first writing a book about focusing, feeling quite nervous that Gene might disapprove. I guess I didn't know him very well. Might disapprove of me writing something different from what he wrote. And this was his response. This is what he said to me, and also what he wrote in his own book published the same year. Dear Ann, keep going. And I wonder if I could have 2 minutes to share a recording of Gene's voice talking about the bigger system. To me, that's so moving and inspiring that Gene's point of view is a holistic and inclusive view of reality itself. Don't know the fancy word for that, but that's what we hear in this.
Every living creature is part of a much bigger system. It does half the job just to know that there is a bigger system, and I'm part of that bigger system. I'm in it. I'm not differentiated from it. I'm part of it. I think that I'm a very small person, and I'm riding on a very large thing that goes down, 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 down. And it makes me smile because because I'm so small and this thing is so large. And it goes down and down and down. It goes down all the way to the felt sense, and then it goes under that, and there's more under that, and I don't know what it is. And it's so clear to me that the I is that whole thing that goes all the way down and has the bigger system with it or in it or under it or over it or whatever. So there are all these different possible I's. This immediate I that I am, I get all upset about something that I need and I can't get it or something, or I get mad at somebody, or I get impatient with little things, and that's an I, and then there's another I under that, and there's another one under that, and there are 12 of them next to each other. It's remarkable how the bigger system includes me. It won't play without me. It's so interesting. You would think that I don't matter, but no, I'm a whole version of the bigger system. The bigger system comes in all these versions, and each individual is another version of the bigger system.
Each individual is another version of the bigger system. And just to be clear, he's saying there's all these I's, meaning selves. It's not the word I, it's the word capital letter I.
Thank you.
Goes
so
down
much,
under
Ann.
the felt sense. My pleasure.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you,
I
Melinda.
had a story about him and the bigger system also, so I'll share mine later. Thank you so much. That was a delight.
Rob, would you like to go next?
So I remember two things that are related. One is that early on in learning Gene's philosophy, I realized that EMDR could be understood within a context of the process model and Gene's philosophy. And EMDR is a kind of therapy, if you don't know, but it doesn't matter. And so I was ready to write an article about that. And Gene discouraged me. And his message was, at least as I recall, that this wasn't their process. And if by writing such an article, I would be disrupting or interfering with or failing to affirm their process. And if I was going to write something, I should write something within their process that would help them carry forward. And that touched me and it stayed with me for years, that his deep concern for each process and wanting to nurture it, and not so worried about his own process, but worried about the other. And then that comes to another memory, which came just from thinking about this, that there was a time when I'd been studying with him for a while, and he asked if it was okay for him to stop taking care of me. And I didn't know what he meant, but I said, sure, do whatever you want. And then he became a different interlocutor. He was much more, he would confront me and sometimes very sharply. And he would push back against things I was saying. And from that, of course, I grew and changed and learned much more. But looking back on it from this context now, I realized what he was really saying is that, can we change what this process is about right now? Instead of this process carrying you, Rob, forward, can we devote this process to carrying philosophy forward, or the philosophy of the implicit? And then that's what we were both caring about. And it feels very deep to me that he was concerned about carrying forward, and he was clear about what process it was. And so he'd carry forward my development, or he'd carry forward the development of philosophy or his own, the philosophy of the implicit. And then also carry forward the larger intricacy. But that's what he was about, carrying forward.
Thank you. Ed Casey, would you like to say a few words?
Gene and I had known each other in Chicago, being members of different societies, particularly the Society for Phenomenology and Existential Philosophy. Then he moved to New York. I too moved to New York, and he proposed a series of conversations. He was just composing an early version of the process model, and he wanted criticism. He did not want praise. He said, "What's wrong with this, Ed? Tell me, where is it falling apart? And what can I do about it?" Well, we agreed to disagree on one thing. He didn't, in the process model at that stage, there was no way by which the different senses of environment, especially environment 1 and environment 2, could relate to each other. I kept pressing him. I said, how are these? It's a remarkable distinction. It's true, but it leaves the world bifurcated and alienated. We parted, not in any angry way, but I had moved on to a different job at that point. We didn't see each other for several years. And I finally looked him up and went to Springdale and to his house. And as soon as I walked in the door, he said, "Ed, I have the answer to your question." And the question that I'd been pressing him on years ago, probably 5 years ago. And he said, the answer is that the different environments connect at their edges. And he said, I've devised a whole new practice, thinking at the edge. And I said, Gene, this is kind of amazing. I'm writing a book called The World on Edge. And we sat down and then had a series of conversations over the next several years about edge and the importance of edge. And the conclusion we came to was that edge is not a spatial delineation or a physical termination, but edge is an event. It's a happening. It's spatiotemporal. It's neither purely spatial nor purely temporal, but it brings space and time together, and that's what environments do, and that's what process does. And we really were kind of jubilant because we realized that working quite independently of each other, we had come to appreciate the depth, the significance, the meaning of a word that we usually dismiss, it's just the end of things, right? As Gene put it, and I end with this remark, which I found quite characteristic of Gene, of the person and of the thinker, that if you take a kind of edge like rim, a rim is not just the end of an object. It's not just the contour. It's not just the outline. But a rim is where something connects with its larger environment, as in a landscape in which the rim of a piece of land, a region in that landscape, takes you into the larger landscape and lets you, as it were, penetrate it and live in it and through it. And that's because the edge is carrying you forward. And I pick up the phrase carrying forward from an earlier statement here. The edge carries you forward because it's an event that refuses to be statically conceived. It's dynamically propulsive. And so edge, process, thinking, it all came together in the notion of edge as event. And I can't tell you how I, as a philosopher, learned so much philosophy from Gene that he really became a mentor to me. And I was delighted to edit a collection of papers saying what we mean that has now been published, as well as shepherding the process model itself through the press, the same press, Northwestern. So I'm happy to give tribute to Gene, an extraordinary thinker and an extraordinary human being. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. And maybe you might want to say the book in case people want to get it and read it.
Saying what we mean.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Well, my pleasure.
And I thought we were giving you a gift, but I'm getting a gift back myself. Thank you. Charlotte.
Yes, I mean, I've been so deeply grateful to Gene ever since I first came across focusing 25 years ago. I did an intro workshop at the weekend, and it was just like, finally, it really felt like home. It really felt like a therapeutic home. I was training as a psychotherapist then. And then I moved to the US and was lucky enough to do my 2-year certification in focusing oriented therapy with Mary, his wife, Mary Hendricks, who then years later handed over the training to me to continue. And so I've been teaching these classes over and over again for years now. And what is always surprising is just how new and fresh and alive they feel. And it's so life-giving. And this just, for me, so speaks to that we are interaction, the newness and the more that is always emerging, that I feel that Gene has given us the steps and the knowledge, or help me understand that process and how to facilitate this very miraculous and natural organic process. And that the being, the interaction, that we are interaction, that we are interaction with the whole big everything as well as with each other, and how the being with another is facilitating this very organic, natural forward movement as we open the implicit intricacy of the more together. So I'm so deeply grateful to Gene for being that with me. Because I only knew Gene in the later part of his life, and I was lucky enough to have him come over to my place and go over to his place. And he always really embodied that central tenet, which was to be a real other person, to really just be present as a real other person with another, with nothing in between. And that's so precious to me. And he always embodied that for me. And so I'm really enormously grateful to Gene for that miracle, and to be able to learn from him directly, as well as many other teachers, the micro steps of this process and the being with. So thank you. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm going to pick up on the word that Charlotte just spoke, and she used the word precious. And so this was very, the relationship that I had with Gene was and is very precious to me. So I'll tell a little bit about that. I had been focusing, and Christel Kraft is here. She was my teacher. I had been focusing for about 5 years, and both in many partnerships and individually. And some of what the person behind these eyes is the phrase that Gene would use, was struggling with, and to use a word he used with me at some point in time, my conniptions about my Jewish identity and about prayer and about Jewish practice. So there, lots of those things would come up for me in my early morning focusings. And at some particular point in all of that, I had something came up, a couple of things came up for me in my own focusing. And I'll bring Gene into this in a moment, but Gene, I learned focusing from Gene, or from a teacher from Gene. So I would have some deep kind of thing came up for me at some point in time about a Holocaust memory. and something that I don't know how to think about, but of seeing myself running away from a burning building and hearing screams. And then that was one. And then there was another one where in my focusing something, I forgave God for making me a Jew. And then there was this other one, and where I had this kind of an image of a number of Hasidic men praying together, and one person kind of walking off, walking away from the grouping towards a river, but still holding his prayer book. And I don't know whether or not that represented Gene or whether that represented me, but I, at some point in time, had this wish that I would be able to meet him. Well, a couple of months later, I was at a gathering with Rabbi Zalman Schachter here in Winnipeg, who had come back to Winnipeg. Somebody introduced. I was talking to him, and someone introduced him to me, and he said, I was talking to him, and someone said, "Oh, Stephen, he teaches focusing," and then Zalman Schachter did an imitation of Gene. And I got very curious and went home, and a day or two later, because of the courage that came to me from focusing, I wrote to him and told him about the encounter and how focusing had been so important in my Jewish practice and in my conniptions, if you will. Anyhow, he got back to me about 3 weeks later, and he apologized to me. So I'm going to tell you a few things about, just the personal aspect of the connection. He apologized to me for being late. He gave me his phone number and in the email, and that we could talk. And what the beginning of our relationship was talking about how we might be able to bring focusing as a process to enliven Jewish prayer and the liturgy. And I remember very quickly in that first meeting or two, him running to another room and grabbing the Siddur, which is the Jewish liturgy, and then opening it up at some particular spot and excitedly wanting to go inside, take a portion of it and go inside and see how what it did for him and how he related to it. So that was our, the beginnings that we had. We also talked about, I'd mentioned that there's a particular prayer that was my favorite prayer that spoke to me about focusing. The English translation is that cleanse our heart that we may serve you in truth. And he told me that had been his favorite prayer as well. So we had that kind of bond. Anyway, quickly, I'd noticed a couple of times, I had been blessed by reading in his books about the term inner critic, which I have been no stranger to, and it was very helpful to me. And I heard his inner critic. And so it came out of my mouth that I said to him, if you'd I told him I heard it, and I said, if you'd like to be listened to in relationship to that, then I will. And he said, well, I'll take it down into my stomach and I'll let you know. And he took it down into his stomach. And the next time we met in a couple of weeks, he said, okay. And we said, now let's thicken the relationship. And so we became focusing partners, which was a blessing of my life. And it was, we would focus on, there would be the themes would be things with themes related to Judaism, personal things, interacting with experiences of the more God, the whole big show, he would call it. I'll share this because I can't share anything else, but just this idea that he said to me something to the effect of, his notion of there's a God above and a God below. And it kind of picks up on what Ann was talking about, and talked about the God below always being able to kind of renew in some kind of way. So that was the relationship. And so there was laughter, and so it's the person inside. There was laughter, there were tears that were shared. And I'll just say a couple of things something related to his kindness and the carrying forward that Rob had mentioned. There had been a time in my life about a decade ago now, in which everything went upside down. And so we did some focusing about 4 days into all of that, and a very powerful image, archetypal spiritual image came. And those kinds of things kept happening in our interaction. And it was hopeful. And the next day, Gene called and said that he had written down what had come up for me, and did I want it? And he repeated it and then sent it to me via email. So there's, I just wanted to share about the warmth and the kindness, and you can only, people have had experiences of being listened to by Gene, and in a certain sense being able to listen and to learn it as well. He was a gentle teacher as well.
Thank you, Steve. Lynn, I think maybe it's time for you.
I was going to share something also about spirituality. It seems that it's a big theme here, and that's not what Gene was known for. But people who are attracted to focusing are often people who are spiritual in some way, seekers, and even that word he wouldn't like, and I don't like exactly either, but we don't know what word to call that. Gene was wonderful about not getting bogged down in terms and words. Always wanted to go to the specific felt experience of everything. And that is such an important teacher and model for me now in this political age, where we are getting so polarized, and where words become terms and become weapons so easily. So what I wanted to share was a moment where I said to Gene, in the training I'm doing for focusing-oriented relational therapy, why don't you talk about spirituality? People want to know about that. And he said, I never talk about those kinds of things, because I'm going to, if I use any words like that, I'm going to lose half of the people in the room. And I don't have to lose them, because it's an experience. It isn't about the words and what the words mean to people. And so I understood that. And I said, but people want to know something about your perspective or experience. And he said, oh, okay, I'll talk about it. So Charlotte was there then, actually. We had our meeting, which we met in my loft in New York. And Gene was talking about the more of everything, the intricacy of everything. And then he pointed to the window and he said, and whatever the fuck it is, you know, the big whatever the fuck it is. And then he went on. And I gathered the students afterwards. No, first I spoke to Gene, and Gene said, well, what did they think about my talking about spirituality? And I said, you did? He said, yes, of course. And I said, well, I'll record what they say. And I had the meeting, and actually this would be available if anybody wants it. And I said to the class, well, what did you think of Gene talking about spirituality? And they said, what, he did? All that they noticed was that he said the word fuck. He said the word fuck. And so his way of talking about the most sacred was to want to bring it to some place where it wouldn't get stuck in some kind of dogma or doctrine. Spirituality is so interwoven in who he is and what he taught and how he lived. In the later part of his life, when I would go and see him at his house, he would be sitting by the door, the glass door, very feeble at that point, and just sitting there gazing out. And I would say, what do you see? And he would say, it's the out there. It's the big system. It's the everything. And when I can sit and look at the trees, I'm filled with that. And so when I sit by my window and I look out and see the trees, I often think of Gene and think of his incredible felt experience of living in and living with and living this big system that we all are, that goes out and out and out and down and down and down and to the future and to the past, and that every person is a microcosm of that system. I think that's all that I want to say here. But I'd like to tell you that Joan Klagsbrun has contributed a piece of music for this event for Gene's birthday. And Steve is going to tell us a little bit about this music. And then when you listen to it, maybe you could take that time to just feel into what you've heard today.
I'll tell you a little bit about this song. It's a song that where it says lechi lach, which means go towards or go, and the meaning of it is it comes from a portion of the Torah that talks about, it says lech lecha, go towards. It's been translated as go away, but the actual translation is go towards yourself. And so this particular song, which I have a personal connection with, because it was sung at my son's bar mitzvah, but also but the focusing connection is very powerful, because there is so much of what focusing what focusing can do and does in terms of helping us to move towards ourselves. So that would be the introduction.
Joan is going to say something before we begin the song.
It's been so lovely to see friends and to hear these stories. I'm so touched. Our love for Gene is palpable today. I feel it. I just wanted to say a quick thing, that one of the things Gene often said to me, and he probably said it to many of you, is whenever I would tell him I was about to teach a class, or I was going to start a conference or do some research, or he would always say, "That's great, Joan. Just make sure you get something for yourself. Get something for yourself." So as we listen to this song, in addition to thinking about Gene and his journey, I hope we all take a moment to get something for ourselves.
Oh, thank you, Joan. That's a wonderful reminder.
To a land that I will show you. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. Lechi lach, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing.
Oh, thank you so much, Joan, for contributing that beautiful song. Let's just take a couple of breaths there. We're celebrating Gene's journey and all of our journeys and the journey of the focusing world and the journey of the larger system here, right? That idea of journey and being blessed on the journey. And now there's time for you to share just anything that that you would like to share about Gene. We want to hear anything that you have to share, but we would ask you to be very brief so that we can hear from as many people as possible.
I'd like to say something.
Yes, please.
Okay. I met Gene with Ann Weiser back many years ago in 1970. Changes, and I learned my focusing from Gene and Mary and others. But what I learned most is about with Gene is what is to know what is behind the words, what's behind the emotions that someone states. And when you're actually taking that in, when you're with another, you can diffuse any situation, especially conflict situations. And so, from my view, very simply, we need to go back to the basics, and because we're often stuck in our perceptions.
Thank you so much, David.
I met Gene probably in 1968 as a graduate student. This is my soul collage card. It's for Gene and me. It's the Capricorn goat, which is his, I'm December 24th and he's 25th. When I knew him, he was working. And it seems that later in his life, he had more time to sit and share with people. But my first interaction with him, as continued for the next 50 years, was a conflict. He was to be teaching abnormal psychology. And I think he handed out whatever it's called, list of the class. And it was basically the chapters from the book. And then I think he said, and let's have volunteers for who's going to teach what chapter. And I was basically, hello, I'm paying money for you to teach me. He said, well, what chapter would you like to do? Basically. And all his courses, and what he taught was focusing and the beginnings of theory building. So I took an existential phenomenology course with him, and I took a theory building course, but really that is in the abnormal psychology class, that's what he taught. So, well, it was infuriating to me. Anyway, so Gene was a 1940s, 1950s man. He was married, he had 2 children. And then 1970s, the world cataclysm, the Vietnam War, and Mary Hendricks and Kristen Glauser and Jill Gardner, and all together with Gene. Gene like found his group. He'd already written articles from his work with Carl Rogers about a peer counseling model for community mental health, that these skills of listening and focusing, that anybody could do them. And there we were, ready. So that was my knowing of Gene. He didn't hang out. He did a 10-week training once a year. And the rest of the time, we all ran the Changes group. He was a strategist. I think of him kind of as an almost autistic person in terms of how much he stayed in his room working, but he also knew how to work the system. You know, you might think, oh, you know, Gene Gendlin, poor guy, he's not connected. Well, he knew how to work the system. He had already started a journal and edited it. He'd already done a huge research project, and he knew how to do things. Like he would very often miss meetings he was supposed to have to supervise my dissertation, for instance, but he was totally committed and would not let me quit. He got many women to get their PhDs just with that willpower of his. So I'm eternally grateful for that. I remember he would read art books in the morning when he couldn't wake up and get into theory building. He would read art books. He would have Gary Prouty over to his house to talk as a simpatico thinker. And what I really treasure the most about Gene, sometimes in a group, he was really not such a good listener, but when he was one-on-one with a person, this touches me, he taught us to hold that other person's experiencing as a many-faceted jewel, as the most sacred thing, and to help the unfolding and the shining of all those facets. And that's to just watch a video of him doing that is just to be in the presence of the sacred. So I appreciate that. Thank you for doing this. Nice to see all these faces.
Oh, thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear from you about Gene's early life.
The last several years of Gene's life, I had weekly conversations with him over the phone doing philosophy. What struck me is how much philosophy was, I would call it a kind of a determined joy for him. It was a joy just in doing it, that you could just hear it in his voice. He would open up and going forward. And the determination came with, there was always going to be a step toward more right. You know, whatever this was, we were at least going to get a step toward more right. And it was real education. What really startled me, though, was when I put it together, was the breadth of how focusing lived, what was living in him. In addition to the joy, Gene also carried with him the experience of a 10-year-old boy who was fleeing the Holocaust. I've heard two of his stories, one of them during the Anschluss, which is when the Germans took over Austria. And this was in March of 1938. And this was real danger. I mean, the day after the Germans came in, Himmler was down in Vienna putting Austrian Jews into concentration camps. Later that year, when Gene was still 10, he and his mother and father fled Austria, which had been annexed by Germany, and had a rather close call on that. They were going from Austria into Germany and then into the Netherlands, where they would stop off in London and then go to New York, where he had an uncle that was going to give them shelter. They stopped in Germany, and his dad got off the train to get lemonade for Gene. While they were, while he was off the train, a German soldier came in asking about the whereabouts of Dr. Gendlin, as he was called then. And they stayed until almost the time the questioning Gene's mother. Gene was present, of course. And they stayed really up until very close to the time the train was leaving. Fortunately, Gene's dad evidently had a tendency to do anything at the very last minute, and he literally jumped on the train as the train was just moving out. But that was how close things were. What really cemented that for me was something that happened during one of the dialogues, Ann, that you and Gene used to have. One of the participants asked Gene, "Do you think about the Holocaust?" And he said, "I think about it every day." Literally every day. The participant then said, what can you do to help us understand the Holocaust? And he said, "I don't know, but even the death of one child is too much. And I read that in the context of a statement he made several times, that a kind of a little piece of spirituality in it, saying, if the individual is not sacred, there's no damn thing that's sacred. And I heard him say that a number of times. And I kind of listen into what he writes with that sense of the experience of a 10-year-old boy fleeing for his life and the life of his family, and thinking about it every day for 80 years.
Thank you so much, David.
I didn't meet Gene until 1970. One of the first things that impressed me about him was that his eyes looked as though he carried the weight of the world in them. There was something that he carried, a great weight that he must have gone in and helped lift from time to time. And I didn't know anything about his background in those days. But he never let himself get in the way of what was happening. And more than once I saw him in workshops when sometimes you get a wise guy who kind of tried to steal the process, show off when he was demonstrating with somebody, or who was just somewhere not into focusing. And Gene would, even if there were 50 people in the room, would go where that person was and follow it in that place. And that was just who he was, in a way, that your process when you were with him was more important than his theoretical philosophy or his ideas about what the process should be. It was the process that you needed at the time, whether you knew it or not. And I had to wear a plaid shirt today in his honor. So thank you for putting it. Thank you for putting it together.
Wendi? Hi, I would just like to say that, of course, my experiences with Gene were much less than everybody else's here, probably. But I did focus with him once, and I do appreciate him and his legacy and all of you. So I wanted to thank you. One of the major things that I felt from him was sort of a nothing. It was everything and nothing. He was just there and still and present. And that was one of my first experiences. And I just really appreciated him and all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
I once talked to Gene when I visited him in Spring Valley in his house about dead people and in what way they are still alive. And we discussed it, and I said, yeah, and they live in us. And that's the way their life continues. And Gene said, yes, and people live in us even when they are not dead. Mm. And we both laughed. Mm-hmm. And that meant a lot to me. And I wish that Gene lives in us and we in each other for the time to come. And what describes Gene for me best is a verse of Robert Foxcroft's poem that Rob Foxcroft wrote for the memorial in 2017. It says, "For no one smiled like you and welcomed the unknowing. You pointed to the dew where a new green shoot was growing." Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I love the idea that, Gene lives in us even when he was alive, because he would always say to me when I was at the Institute, Melinda, it's not enough to work on one workshop. What's going to happen after that? People come together and then they all disperse, and that's not good enough. You got to get focusing in institutions. You got to get focusing at the United Nations. You got to get focusing in organizations. And so that brought Pat and I and all the other people who are working with us to create Focusing Initiatives International, where we are working on that. And so he got to see that while he was alive and was really thrilled about that. So he's with us every day.
The one image that always stays with me was the first time when I saw him in Chicago. He came in and he just didn't look like any very important person. He was just a normal human being that I felt immediately connected to. And what he said was, "Who am I? And who is the eye that is looking at the eye? And who is that eye who is looking at the eye, and the eye, and the eye?" And I somehow recognized, my God, there is a people, one person that knows that I'm so many me's. And I felt so totally affirmed in my idea. I am so many different me's, and I'm all of them, and I can be conscious of all of them, and it is perfectly okay to be all of them. And that has gone with me since, well, the 80s, because I didn't know that not everybody was that way. I thought I was a little abnormal, because most people just seem to be one people. But thank you. It just came out. That was my main image of Gene, accepting everything that is.
Thank you so much, Christel. That
Thank you.
says so much, doesn't it? The many me's that are welcomed and accepted, and that we know that we're so many me's. Thank you.
I first met Gene, I believe, in 2006, after I had moved to the East Coast, and I believe it was at a TAE conference. I feel a real sense of appreciation for many of the things that people have spoken about already, about how he was with individual people when he was listening to them, and also his sense of the all that stuff out there, and his irreverent sense, and yet very deeply reverent sense of the larger whole. And I just want to say something about kind of an intermediate level between the personal and the cosmic, which is that Gene had a real deep care and concern and awareness about society. And I remember being very, very, very deeply moved by his story about the town, his metaphor of how we were evolving to the next level of social organization. And it wasn't just something that he was observing out there, it was something that he wanted all of us to be actively taking part of by connecting with our neighbors. I believe it was Rob Parker who said something earlier about how Gene was really valued other processes in addition to the focusing processes. And he was very aware of how all of these various communities out there had practices that had to do with presence and the power of presencing, which he called the interhuman attention. And he felt so strongly that we should each not just know focusing, but know a handful of practices that had to do with interhuman attention, so that we could weave these connections with our neighbors, so that we could become this more self-aware town, larger community of the new stage of human development and evolution. And that touched me deeply. And it's a vision of his that I mention often whenever I have the chance to talk about him and what he meant to me and how much he inspired me. And along those lines, he would say this thing about how he had a story that he would tell, and I don't have all of the details, but about how, he was going to a certain meditation group for like 5 years before he discovered that the person who sat next to him also had a shared interest in some other thing, right? But because whenever we're in a group, we tend to wear our hats that have to do with our allegiance to that group. And so we can not find out all the many interconnected ways that we actually connect. And And so in his honor, there are times in groups that I lead where I often make it a practice to really invite what people's other connections are, what people's membership with other groups are, what are they bringing into the room so that we can make more visible that interconnected weave that we are. And the last thing is that, you know, Gene was very concerned about groups and organizations and how all that works, because he wanted, as Melinda said, he wanted to have focusing become part of the fabric of various organizations and institutions and hospitals and prisons and schools and all of that. And I had the enormous privilege for a period of time, and I just feel like I was so young and I didn't really realize what an enormous privilege it was to, you know, be having these weekly phone conversations with him where we would take turns and we would explore all of these things for about 1.5 years. And I just remember at one point when I had first met him, I was so excited because he was doing this thing that had to do, somebody had asked him a question, he'd responded, and then another person had raised this thing that was like slightly critical. And he said, "No, hold on. This person over here, don't say it to that person, say it to me." And I commented afterwards about this with him because it was something very, very familiar to me from another context. And he just laughed. He said this great big laugh. And he said, "Oh, you're talking about how I was destroying group process back there." And I said, no, Gene, you weren't destroying group process. You were protecting each person's creative space by making sure that the critical thing that somebody else said didn't, you know, come crashing down on it. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, destroying group process." So he had this idea from the 50s, from tea groups, from whatever, that it wasn't group process unless people were going at each other, right? But that was something that he really didn't want to allow to happen because he knew how precious and how important it was for each person in a group to be able to protect their own creativity, their own thought. So we had lots of wonderful conversations about group process and organizations and social change. And I remember how delighted he was in 2011 when Occupy started to happen. He was just like beaming. And so I just want to bring into here that facet of Gene, who really believed in social transformation and the possibilities of that, and who really cared about the social world that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosa. I never quite knew what Gene was talking about when he would say, "I'm destroying group process." And I had heard him say that many times also. And community empowerment and community processes are so important to him and are so important, you know, a world now. So thank you for bringing that in here.
Pat and I got to visit Gene at his home after we had been working in Afghanistan for a while. And he wanted to talk to us. We went over there and he wanted to know how in a war-torn country that, well, war hasn't gotten over yet, you know, how focusing was actually, how we were actually talking about focusing to make a difference. And we introduced him to the idea of the felt sense being, or what we're listening to are inner guests. They don't stay the same. They sort of form up, they show up, and we listen to them. And we told them the story about how some violence was averted in a town because someone learned to go sit down and listen to their inner guest first. And he was just, how did they stop? I can't understand. He said, how did that person stop and sit down in the middle of being angry and about ready to go hit somebody. And how did they do that? I can't do that. How did they do that? And well, you know, but the thing that got me was he was actively really putting himself in that situation and trying to sense, how did that change happen? Right there, go in there, he said. How did that change happen? And it was so that for me made me realize that how active his involvement in everything was. It was like, no, right there, go in there. How did that happen? And I didn't really understand him at the time totally, but yeah, I just wanted to share that sort of active, intense involvement, curiosity that he had.
Thank you so much for bringing that, Nina, that active, intense involvement and curiosity about the detail of the experience and not just taking something conceptually. Thank you.
Pat, the other half of the Nina, Joy, and Pat team. That was the first time I'd really met Gene. I had met him briefly at a conference where he'd walked in and out again. I was pretty naive. You know, who's Gene? But he also had us do one of the activities that we had developed, the Safe, Calm Place. And I remember he wanted us to actually lead him through it the way we would in Afghanistan. And I did, and he didn't have any of those long pauses. And I thought, this is weird. And I'd say something and he'd say, okay. And he'd write it down. And I'd say something, you know, now you might want to check. And he'd say, okay, next, you know. So it was like, and it was really, but I also realized in that he was living the focusing process. He wasn't bringing the technique in for this event. He was living it. And I think that was my first really deep understanding. Not understanding yet. First deep glimmer into this greater process we call focusing.
Mm. Yes. The larger focusing, not the technique of focusing.
What was really important with Gene is this whole sense of the knowing that we have that's within ourselves already, but there has to be another. And that's so critical in our process. And then also he said to me once, how come focusing isn't as grand as parental effectiveness training? He said that to me once when I was visiting him in New York. So
how come focusing is not
as great as parent effectiveness training? This was many, many years ago.
As parenting.
Parent effectiveness training was a real, you know, the be and end all of. But he wanted to get out to everybody, and really the memorial to him, to me, is the memorial. When I listen to the memorial to Mary Hendricks, and she says, focusing is not anybody's, it's everybody's. And that's what she says in her, that's what she says in her memorial. And that is so perfect for me and relates to how Gene wants to get it to everyone. And she says it perfectly. You know, focusing is not anybody's, it's everybody's.
Absolutely.
From everything I heard, something, and maybe help me make it more clear what I'm saying. So there was one person right in the beginning, I don't remember who it was, pointing to that we are part of something more. We are part of something more. So you remember what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Okay. And then that piece where people shared about, and I don't know if that's exactly true, but Gene interrupting a group process to focus on the individual. And in some way, the way it landed for me, almost like taking the individual out of whatever criticism or whatever else would be coming at them, to solely focus on them. And to me, that seems like a contradiction. Because if that person is so much part of everything, wouldn't also be the critical comment or whatever is coming also be part of that whole? And why separate them?
Yes, yes. That is so important for the future. And there are contradictions in Gene's. Gene was so worried about losing the individual. And the rock bottom of his philosophy is that we are made of interaction. We are interaction.
So that seems like a contradiction to me right now.
Yes, and it's that way of the both sides of the coin. It's kind of a koan in a sense. I do want to say that when Gene would say he's destroying group process, it was a joke. You know, he would say that laughing like a devilish little kid. And he deeply, deeply wanted group process, but he didn't want to lose the individual in it.
He would always say there's a paradox in anything we say.
Absolutely. And paradox was a wonderful carrying forward. It's that when you have the paradox that you have
That's right.
the carrying forward.
That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Right. So the last 10 minutes, are we up for having some birthday wishes? I think that Robert, you really started that because you were wishing for this to be attended to more, this paradox of the individual being central and the group and the community and the large system being central, and how we hold those. So I'm going to make that be my wish, that my wish for focusing is that we find a way of stretching those edges of Gene that had to do with community life and social life that was so important to him. And he gave us so much about it, but didn't have time to fully spell that out, and that the path to that feels like it's, you know, so important for these times. So my wish is that we as a town can move in that direction, those of us who feel passionate about it. Anybody else have a wish for what you want focusing to be in the future? Or I don't even know if we should call it focusing. Let me call it the big focusing, the Interhuman Attention Project.
Here is Marine in Montreal.
Marine, yes, good to see you.
Hello. The thing is still there of actually it's like there is not enough translation in French of articles and books and all of that, and it's still there, and I will not be the one doing it. I know, but there's still so much to be done into French.
Absolutely. Translation in this global reality is so important.
Yeah.
Yes, amen, I feel like saying.
I just say hello to Marine, who's been around since the 1980s at least.
Yes.
Or earlier, perhaps. Hello.
Yes, hello.
I have a 30-second video I found that I would like to share. And aside from it speaking for itself, what resonated with me was the formality of the first part and the breakthrough, real down to earth of the second part.
Oh, that's beautiful. Mitch, maybe you can share Christine's image as her contribution there.
Sure.
This Christine, my assistant and helper, this
do that.
image that she made, it captures something of Gene, I think.
Adorable.
Yes.
Oh my, that is priceless.
Yes. So Gene. Thank you, Mitch.
I have a wish.
Yes.
I feel so inspired from hearing everyone's sharing today that I'm like, wow, what would it be like to live my life? I was almost going to say more like Gene, but I realized he wouldn't want me to say that. He would say how to live life more like me. And I haven't met him before. And there's just such a richness and a depth. Like, if I can live in this kind of present to the polarity of the whole wholeness and the deep downness, and like in each moment, maybe my mom might come downstairs right now and be like, John, and did you wash the toilet? Like, oh, no. And then like how, like, be in that kind of space and welcome the processes by which I'm not in those spaces, just feels so inspiring. I'm like, oh man, like there's so much to learn, and that's something I'm so excited. Like, all right, what reading do I do? Like who do I talk to? How so that process starts spinning, but for me personally, like I can say we have a wish that like focusing has been super impactful, both as a daily life fundamental skill, as well as a personal practice, as well as a interpersonal facilitation kind of practice for us. And our wish is like, how can we have people who are younger be like super excited into focusing? Like, we ideally wouldn't be the youngest people in the group, that like we're like maybe the mid tier. And like I see lots of friends of ours and younger like learn all these different other types of consciousness practices, and I know Gene would love that. And it's like we feel so privileged to be able to be in this room. Like, oh my God, here are the elders of this community. Like, wow, we can just be here. Like, holy crap! And how do we expand that more and more people get this? That it's not lost. It's not lost in y'all's wisdom. So that's a wish that I have.
Oh, Gene is loving that wish, Jonathan. Gene is just grinning all over the place with that wish.
Thank you, Lynn.
And may you make it happen.
And also, that is what Focusing Initiatives International, who's sponsoring coronaplaza.life, Melinda and Pat, that is their mission. I think the Focusing Institute also has that as a mission, but it became the more professional organization for training people and certifying and all of that. But that's what coronaplaza.life and Focusing Initiatives International, you can visit their website. They have wonderful low-cost programs teaching resilient community focusing in what we call third world countries, or I mean, they're doing it. So that's it.
And I want to underline also Jonathan's particularity of young people being engaged and inflamed, as is the word that comes, right? With this amazing work.
I will offer a wish. I actually just really want to second Olivia and Jonathan's wish that focusing be picked up by many young people all over the world. I think it's a wonderful wish. And I want to say that part of the tradition of what I learned from Gene is anybody who had a project about getting focusing out into the world, like he wanted to meet with you and listen to you and help you find your own next steps forward. So I just offer myself, as well as other people here, whoever wants to volunteer. But if you ever want to just have somebody listen to you to support
Wow,
your own
what an
step
offer.
on how you can do that, I would be delighted. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rosa. What a wonderful wish. And I want to say that there are videos of Johnathan and Zhijing up on my channel, and Zhijing's focusing process has been shown in China and many other places. So you can find that too. We're going to end with a song that one of our focusing oriented relational therapist, Ruti Havat-Zelit, sang for Gene, and it was recorded. So this is her voice singing a lullaby to Gene, and Gene loved, he was so appreciative. This was toward the end of his life. So appreciative of Ruti's singing. And so we're going to end with that song.
For you, Gene.
Bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you all for coming to this party. And if anybody else wants to have a Gene party, it doesn't have to be at Christmas. It could be another time to have a Gene party. Bye-bye now. Have a lovely rest of your holiday.
Thank you, Lynn.
You wishing
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wishing you all a nourishing year.
Thank
Merci
you.
beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A bientôt.
Vielen Dank.
Bye bye. I was saying the Preston.
Good luck, Johnathan and Olivia.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Dobranoc. How are you doing?
You're